So at the airport, we had this year just about 14 million.
Johnson,
yes, sir.
Question.
Yeah.
Bill, just a quick question. You mentioned the importance of the Columbia on a couple occasions for exports. Are there any short-term or long-term issues that we need to be concerned about regarding navigability there? I know that there was a lot of work that went on to some of the locks last year and so forth, but in terms of channel dredging...
Oh, man, there are just nothing but issues.
As legislators, are there things...
Yeah, sure. And I'll give you a couple of examples. You know, most of the infrastructure on the river itself is really pretty old, if you think about it. The dams were constructed during the New Deal. And so this last lock closure, which lasted for months, was really, it had to be done. We did a lot of work with the shippers, and I think most people, they got through it, but it was a real baling wire and gum affair. But they're old, and it was the first major work done on the lock system really since. There's an annual closure, but that's like squirting oil on the hinges, and so there is a lot more work that needs to be done there. One of the dams, and I can't remember if it's the Dalles or one of the others, has a particularly nasty problem with one of the lock doors that could be significant. The jetties are over 100 years old. They need to be completely reconstructed or extended. And if you really look at aerial photographs, you can see how many pieces are missing in the jetties as they were originally built. You can see little humps here and little humps here. And those are really the first most important part of navigation in the Columbia River, because before the jetties, the Columbia was really the graveyard of the Pacific. It was a very dangerous place to be. So the Corps of Engineers is really hard at work at this, doing all the environmental work that needs to be done and making the plans, but it's going to be a big financial lift, and there could be an ask of the states of Oregon and Washington to participate in that. We spent really the better part of 20 years deepening the Columbia River Navigation Channel from 40 feet to 43 feet. It may not sound like much, but particularly for many of Katie's clients and customers, that 3 feet is really powerful. It can take as much as $1 million off the cost of transportation for a vessel of grain, for example. So very important. But today the channel is functionally operating at somewhere between 41 and 41.5 feet because the Corps does not have adequate maintenance budgets. We own a dredge. We sell its service to the Corps of Engineers. We are required to do so. It's out there right now, chugging along, doing as much as it can, but there are real budget limitations there, so that is an issue. When you get upriver, to gain access to the upriver ports, there is a navigation channel. Most people don't realize that, but it's got to be to a depth of 15 feet. That's the authorized level, and there are many places where it's just not. So they have dredging issues as well, and in low water years, that really gets to be a challenge at certain times of the year. So you're probably sorry you asked this question, but there are big challenges. Yeah.
It's good information. It's just something.
And one other thing I would.
It's this committee's auspices to be talking to the Corps about those issues, but certainly as legislators, we need to stay on top
definitely.
of that.
And the U.S. Canada treaty on the operation of the Columbia River is also up for negotiation. That may be the biggest fish of all, so to speak, because that's going to have an enormous impact on the operation of the river.
Representative Jensen.
Yeah, on that, the treaty with Canada is up, and it's, I think, 2014 is the year, the first year that that treaty may be opened. And one of the issues that it seems to me, as I've looked at that, is the flood prevention that is currently used by water storage in 3 of the dams, not in the United States but in Canada. If if something happens to that provision, then we're going to have to manage the flood provision of the Columbia River off of our dams in this country, which could mean could have significant impact on the barge traffic in the upper river region.
It's a very complex.
It's a very complex and very important issue for us as we
Indeed.
As we move into the next few years here. As I said.
Okay. I would just mention again the Tokyo-Amsterdam flights in particular. We were very aggressive in recruiting these flights. The carriers, what they really want are those business class customers who basically pay the bill. And so right after I started at the port in 2001, I was visited by a local delegation of electronics companies, Nike and others, who are traveling. Their employees are traveling all the time. These are companies that combined spend hundreds of millions of dollars on travel. And they said, we really want these nonstop flights. It is, it's a lifestyle issue for our employees who otherwise are connecting multiple times maybe to get where they need to go, flying to Shanghai twice a month, for example. And so our retort to them was, we think there is a market here because we've had it before, but you're going to have to link arms with us. And they said, fine. And so we basically have organized the business travel community in the metropolitan area particularly, but also in other parts of the state and in the Northwest as far back as Boise, to commit to use the services because it's a use it or lose it proposition. These airlines have a kind of a funny theory about making money. They'd like to. In the history of the industry, they haven't. And things have really changed. The things that have allowed them to exist without making a profit are really disappearing rapidly. And so we've been able to achieve a really strong commitment from the business community to use these services. And what it means is in the bellies of the passenger planes, we do have agricultural exports and other air cargo connections that are really, really vital. And it's a two-way street. We're getting people in Oregon who, might not have come here otherwise. They might have gone to Seattle or to San Francisco or some other gateway. It's always a struggle. We are small as a market size to have international service. As I said, the smallest community in the United States that has nonstop service in both directions, and that's something we can be proud of for 5 seconds, and then just a reminder that you have to go out and fight every day to make it work, but it's very, very important.